might not work, but it wasn't working to try to practice it without the presentation mode. So I'm just going to experiment with actually setting GoToMeeting to film my second monitor, the speaker's monitor, and then I get to see the other one. So let's give this a try. Reworked the calendar one, so it's a PowerPoint presentation. I think that I have the timing. Again, we will see. So to kick things off this morning, we're going to start with the calendar and activity packets as our first module. The calendar tends to be something that everybody has at least seen, so it seems like a good place to start. And yes, yet there's usually a little more we can learn there as well. So what are our business goals for this first module? Well, we're looking at how we can clearly communicate daily and weekly responsibilities to the individuals and teams. We're also looking at how we can work more efficiently by eliminating distractions and highlighting the important details. And finally, we're always looking for ways to save time and reduce errors. So in the software, we'll be taking a look at how to create a variety of different calendars by changing the display type, the colors, or activities. We're also going to show how to display subtotals on the calendar for square feet, or even things like the number of slabs or dollars, other number activities that you might be tracking in Job Tracker. Also, how to filter your calendar by a custom job field or by a form field or activity status. And finally, we're going to I think this is where we're going to take a little break, and then we'll also be looking at how to map activities and group by assignee, and then also how to customize activity packets and include attached files. And hopefully not just every attached file, but just the attached files you need. Let's get started. And this is not working. I can't change. There we go. Okay, so let's step back and just make sure that we're all have a pretty good understanding of the basic structure of Job Tracker, because we're going to really be building on that. And I think a good understanding of how it's set up is a good place to start. So we probably all know you have your Job Tracker system. In that system, you have accounts, and every job in your system must be assigned to an account. We can have a single job assigned to a single account, or we could have an account might have a couple jobs or scads of jobs. Now, those jobs will have activities, forms, and files attached to the job. And sometimes a job can also be broken down into phases, little sub-jobs, and each of those phases might have a collection of activities or forms or files attached to each phase. Now, with the calendar is unique because it displays activities and only activities. So a calendar displays activities. If you have an activity that doesn't have a date, it has no place to go on your calendar. So the calendar displays activities that have already been scheduled, at least tentatively. So when we work with people and we share screens and we say, well, show us your calendar, we usually see something like this. And it might work great for the people. I mean, we're talking to people who are using Job Tracker. Most of them are happy. They're getting the job done. They're selling countertops. But this calendar view is limited. There's a lot of information. Someone new can hardly really make out what they're looking at. Also, you'll notice this is actually a monthly calendar with all their activities, template, fabrication, install, repair, but I can only really see a little bit at a time. It takes up so much screen real estate. If my job was to schedule installs, this is kind of cumbersome. Or maybe we do sometimes see different calendars, maybe something like this. Well, all that's really changed here is the shape. Now I have time across the top. And I can at least see a couple installs, but I also see a couple of fabrication things, and I see a whole lot of detail that might be useful to the job, but it might not be useful to me at this moment when I'm trying to do my job. So what makes a good calendar view? there is no one right view, but there are some questions you can ask to determine whether a calendar view is good for a particular task. And those questions might be, okay, who is using this calendar view? Where will they be when they're looking at it? On what kind of device? Are they going to be pulling it up on their phone or on a tablet, or are they in the shop and they'll be looking at a computer? What task are they trying to complete? What do they need to do when they're going to be looking at this calendar view? What do they need to see? And then the key is to remember that less is more. What do we mean by that? It's a common phrase, less is more. We use it a lot in design. Well, I think a good example is JAWS. So this little image captures a lot of it. Less is more. And if you think back, I'm kind of dating myself. I remember I was in the 3rd grade when JAWS first came out. Oh my goodness, that movie was so terrifying. And you know, I lived, the closest I ever got to the ocean was Lake Michigan. There were no sharks, but I'm still to this day afraid of sharks because of that movie. And in that movie, they never showed the whole shark. They only showed that fin, right? They built so much tension, and they never showed us the whole shark. Then in JAWS 3, if anybody got that far, they blew it. They tried to show the whole shark. They showed that big old mouth, and it was so dumb. It completely destroyed. Like, we could see through that this was just a fake shark. It was no longer as terrifying. So I think that's just a good example of less is sometimes very much more. So when you apply that to building a good calendar view, we start by removing what we don't need. So again, we're using this example of building an install calendar. So let's see what we might want to do. We're always going to start by clicking that options button. That's the key. And let's start by at least only selecting the install activities. So we're going to click on that select button under activity types, and we're going to choose only install instead of showing all the extra stuff. The other thing we might do is let's clear all those fields, all that detail that was showing on each square in our calendar. Let's get rid of it. And instead, let's select only what we need to schedule our installs. Now here, you know, a lot of those fields you might recognize, job name, time, duration. I'm also going to pull in a field from one of my job forms. I have a field where I track tear out, and that might not be useful to the shop, but it could be very useful on an install calendar. Okay, so now my list of options looks something more like this, and it gives me a calendar like this. Already, it's a lot easier to wrap my brain around. I'm only looking at installs. I can kind of see what's going on. I see each day. Now, the one thing that I can't really do in this view, though, is I have an activity up here that's unassigned, and it would be really nifty if I could just drag and drop it. We're going to see people doing that in a couple of our Good to Great videos, and it would be really nice if we could just drag and drop it, but there's no way to drag and drop to assign that unassigned install activity right in this view. But we could change that. We could make it even easier. We'll go back to our options window, and we're going to choose a different shape. This time, let's try the assignee by day shape. It's that display type that changes the shape of our calendar. Since we're choosing assignee by day, we're also going to choose our assignees. And in this case, I want it unassigned, because I don't want something not to show up just because it's unassigned. But then I also only need to see things that are assigned to my installers. I'm also, just for kicks, going to pull out, and maybe not just for kicks, I'm also, because it's useful, I'm going to pull out the square feet that is recorded for each of these activities. So right on this calendar, I can see how many square feet I have each installer assigned to do. And again, when I go to look at my square feet, I click on that select button, and I see a whole lot. Well, it can be easier to find exactly what you need if you first select the activity type. I know I'm looking at my installs. When I choose install, that list gets much more manageable, and I see exactly the field that I want. It's my countertop details form where I track my square feet. Cool. Now what I'm looking at, I still have only my installs. I now have a row for my install crew 1, a row for install accrue to, and a row for my unassigned activities. And now I can grab that unassigned activity and I can drag and drop it to a particular assignee, and I can assign that activity very simply without having to open another window. So that's one example. Let's think of another example. That's just one person doing one task. And there are a lot of different tasks that go on in one shop. So this time, let's look at creating a fabrication view, a view for our shop. And we're going to start from an existing view. It's usually easiest if you pick up something that's at least close. I chose one that's already pretty complete, and that's a very different shape, just again to sort of show you what is possible. I'm looking at my fabrication activities, and I actually have them color-coded by material. Because of the way I'm tracking material, I have the option to color code each activity by material, if that's useful to me. But what if I want to change a few things? Right now, I'm only showing the square feet over in the subtotal area. Maybe I also want to see the number of slabs I'm going to need each day. Maybe I have 2 locations. I have Houston and Dallas, and you know what? It'd be really useful. The shop only needs to see Dallas. Oh, how might I do this? First, I make sure I understand what it is I'm looking at. Yep, I'm looking at fabrication. I'm looking at the shape day by display fields, get that shape. I have things color-coded by material. I don't think I need that. Oh yeah, I guess I was going to show you. How did I do that color-coded by material? When you go to show your color coding, a lot of times you only have a few that come with kind of pre-ready when you start Job Tracker. But depending on how you create the custom fields or the form fields, if you color code those fields, a list of value fields, you actually have that option. So if it's important to you, if you've ever thought, oh, it'd be really nice, that's something we could talk about today, both now, be thinking about it now, and in our next session when we talk about our forms. Because this countertop details field is getting pulled in from my countertop details form where I'm tracking material. Now I mentioned, what if we want to add a subtotal for the number of slabs? We're tracking our subtotals here, and at present I have the square feet. I'm going to go back again, and just like I did previously, I'm going to click on fabrication so that I see only the fabrication activities, and then I'll see what my other options are. And if I'm tracking the number of slabs or some other number-related item, like you'll also see my options here are the final total, something I track, then I can also pull that in as a subtotal on that field, on that calendar. Now I mentioned that I'm really interested in showing only my Dallas jobs. Well, as long as that's something I'm tracking someplace, I can filter this calendar to show only my Dallas jobs. I start by clicking Add Filter. And now you do have to know a little bit about your system. I know that I have a custom job field called Store Location. I can choose to filter that store location for Dallas. And now I'm looking at a calendar. Sorry. Where I'm looking only at Dallas. And now I've added a subtotal for the number of slabs I need. That might not be a useful thing for you to track. You know, it might not be worth it for you to start tracking how many slabs do we need on each job. You might already have that resolved for your business, but we just wanted to give you some ideas that you can actually step beyond. If it would be useful for you, if it would solve a problem for you, there might be a way that we can help you do that in Job Tracker. Okay, and this is what we were looking at. Now next I was going to get into mapping activities, but this is where we thought it would be a good time to take a break. We have, as we mentioned, you can each log into our demo database. You can play with some of the views we have there. Make sure that you understand them. Take a look at the different views that might be useful. We have some exercises and activities that you might like to try on the web page that we just pointed out to you. So let's take a little bit of time to just see what would be useful for you to work on, and then we can come back and we'll continue on with mapping and activity packets. Okay, more aware team, that's where I was thinking we might want to take a break, especially since it's early. Let them get their hands busy. If not, I could go forward and we could take a break a little bit later. So I'm going to just go forward now after I take a sip of water. Okay. And obviously, I can see a couple places where I need to smooth out some transitions. I'll go back and look at those. Okay, so let's take a peek at one more as we get started on mapping. Let's take a peek at one more of the calendars you might have already looked at. Our template schedule. Again, here we're looking at template activities only. We're looking at those activities that are either unassigned or that they're assigned to Norm or Marco. This shape ends up being useful for something like a template schedule because a lot of times you're trying to squeeze in as many activities as you can in a day. And a view like this with time across the top makes it pretty easy to see where you have some gaps in your day. So what are we looking at here? The shape, again, is day and assignee by time. Okay, sorry. The shape is day and assignee by time. I might not need that. Okay. So right from here, before we, maybe we're ready to assign Gus's Kitchen, and we have a couple different spots on the calendar we could take a look at. It's often useful then to see where do I have my guys driving so that I don't end up making one person drive clear across town when it would have been much easier to have somebody else do it. That's an occasion where it might be useful to map those activities even before you assign that last one. So you click on a day and you choose Map Activities for that date. And because we started from that calendar, it's going to initially pull only those activities. Notice it's not going to pull install activities or fabrication because I started from my template calendar. Once you do, the addresses from those jobs get dumped into a Google Maps. And you're asked a couple of questions. Do you want to continue? Yes, indeed, I do. Then it will ask you to confirm addresses if they haven't already been confirmed in Google Maps. Once you confirm each address, then you'll get prompted to confirm, to save the map and confirm the coordinates. And finally, you will get each of the locations placed on a map, and you'll see the route, a suggested route, for each of the assignees. So with the example that we're looking at here, Norm are the B pins, and Marco are the C pins. And notice we do still have that one unassigned activity floating out there by itself too. So once we decide maybe who it might make the most sense to assign that one to, we can then go back. Oh, darn it. We can also hide and I think I'm going to switch those so I can show hiding before I show unassigned. Also notice you can then, if you want to look at just one person's map, you can hide or show pins and look at just one person at a time. So now I'm looking only at Norm. And then once we decide, that's where we'll switch, where we want to assign that last job, Gus's Kitchen, we can go back to that calendar. And again, just like that previous calendar, because we have a row for each assignee, it makes it pretty easy, very easy to just drag and drop. And now we're assigning both the time and we're assigning the person who's going to do that activity. The other thing that you can end up doing right from the calendar that can save, that was before I decided to switch my break, that can be useful to do right from the calendar, and again can definitely save time, is to print your activity packets, any paperwork you need for your team right from the calendar. So if I'm looking again at my template calendar and I need to print the paperwork that I send with each guy, I just go to Printable View from this calendar. It's again going to assume that I only need to see my template activities for Norm and Marco for this day. And then it's also, I also have the option to choose when I need a page break. Sometimes you can, I actually prefer to sort of build that into my packets themselves, and we'll take a look at that a little later, but you can specify that here. And finally, if you have more than one packet of information, you would choose that packet. Here, I have just one that I call Field Crew Packet. It pulls template information for my template people, install information for my install people, and repair information for my repair people. And I have all that set up so that I don't have to choose a separate packet. Job Tracker just knows what to pull for each activity. And then I get a printed bundle of information. It pulls together a PDF with all the information compiled. So you'll notice what I'm looking at here is just the first page of a 28-page PDF. It compiled everything I need for each job. This first one is Katarina's Kitchen. Then I might have, later in the packet, I might have Joey Austin's Kitchen. And notice, sure enough, now I'm on page 6 of 28. So it's just, it pulls together one PDF. That means I can just hit print once and it sends it to the printer, and then I can pull everything out and it's all collated. Well, when I say all collated, what might I mean? This first page is just one job form that in our sample database we use as a sort of cover page on a lot of our packets. But we can also include things like urgent or open job issues. And I can filter those issue reports so that it's only showing me those issues if they're open or urgent. If they're already closed, I might decide, nah, I don't need to print it then. I might also want to include CounterGo quotes. For those of you who use CounterGo, this can be very handy to send with your template staff. I have this one set to pull the CounterGo quote, if there's a CounterGo quote attached, to print it. And I say, I don't want to see the price information. I want to see all the details, and I even want to see it in landscape view. I might also say, hey, if I have attached files, please print those, but not all the attached files. Like if I have a signed contract, if I have some billing information, I might not want to print that and send it on a repair or send it with my template guy. But if I have a picture of a slab image, I might say, ooh, if there's a slab image, I'd like my templater to have that so they can just, again, show it, maybe get the customer to sign off again, make sure that we're all on the same page. How did I do that? Well, if I set it up ahead of time, so that as I attach each file, I train the staff to, hey, make sure you label what kind of file this is. Is it a slab image? Is it a customer drawing? Is it a signed contract? Then later, when I set up my activity packets, I can then specify, if it's a template packet, only include it if it's a customer drawing, or a slab image, don't include it if it's a signed contract. And how does that happen? When I go to attach those files, I've set up a file custom field so that my people can label it right from there. And where do we do that? Magic job edit settings area that we're going to spend a lot of time in the next day and a half. We go to job, edit settings, and then we're going to choose file custom field. Here, you can create a custom field. We've named ours file type, and we made it a list of values. That means a drop-down list, and that's where we entered the types of files that we might be using, a slab image, a job site photo, etc. We're going to get more into those data types and creating form fields in the very next section. So, this is something you can work on now, or you could just hold off and we could work on it. You can fold it in after you learn more in the forms section. But I just wanted to point out that that's how it happens. Then when we go back to create those activity packets, we go to the calendar edit settings area. We go to calendar edit settings, and then we choose the option activity packets, and that's where we'll see the activity packets that we've already created. To edit a packet, you just click on that packet, so maybe the Field Crew packet, and choose Edit. Now we're looking at the contents of our Field Crew packet. And you can include a lot of different things in a packet. So for example, in this packet, we've included a job form, the job summary form that you'll see in our training database. We've also included a job issue form, and we've assigned, we've also then included image files and PDFs. And it could be either or. You know how sometimes your people scan and you have one person on staff who always scans to a JPEG and another person who scans to a PDF. You can kind of cover your butt so that both of those or either one gets pulled into the packet. You can also add more formatting things like a page break and even calendar forms. Again, we'll get a little bit more into calendar forms later, but it might be a form that just has some content like, oh, this is our warranty that gets attached at the bottom, or something that needs to get signed. Also then, for each of those items that you decide that you're going to include, a job form or a job issue form, you can then tell Job Tracker when you want this included and when you don't want to include it. So for example, that job summary form, I've said, include that. If someone prints a field crew packet, include that cover sheet, whether it's a template, an install, or a repair. Kind of always include that in a field crew packet. But if it's a counter-go drawing, I really only need that when I'm printing field crew packets for my template staff. My installers don't need it because they have a different, maybe they have the shop packet or something. It's just an example. Similarly, if I have an image file, I might choose to send the customer drawing and this an image file that's labeled customer drawing with my templater, but maybe not with my installers. Let me show you one other example of an activity packet. Again, that was an example of a field crew packet, but you might also print a slightly different packet for your shop. It is still a packet in that it has multiple pages compiled for every fabrication activity, every shop-related activity on my calendar that day. And in my system, we just have the one activity, fabrication. But I have a slightly different combination of forms and information that I pull in. Notice on this one, I'm pulling in the entire countertop details form. Even my guys in the shop like to be able to see that whole thing, one for each countertop on the job. And I also have a slightly different header. Instead of pulling in that whole sort of cover page, the guys in the shop don't need the address, right? They're never going to have to answer a question about when are you coming to install again. They don't need customer information to confirm. They just need to know the name of the job number, who it's assigned to, yada, yada. So I have a slightly different way of setting up a cover, a heading for my shop packets. And again, if we open up the contents of that packet, learning to decipher what you're looking at here can really help you then be able to create exactly what you want. You'll notice I wanted to show you can also include a CAD file. It's another kind of file that you can add in a packet, as well as a slightly different use for a calendar form. That's what I use to create that separate heading, a little header for my shop packet. And more aware people, I have a new screenshot. It looks like I didn't replace it there because I renamed it. Darn it, it's still wrong. I redid this one so it says shop. I changed it so it's shop header is what I renamed that file because it was confusing to have a calendar form named shop packet and a packet named shop packet. So I redid that. I just have to replace that. Okay, so that's our introduction to mapping and activity packets. Again, hopefully that's enough to get you going. The rest of the activities and exercises are available now, and we're here to help you out. So let's dig in and see what might be useful for you. Okay, so let me fix a few of those things. Hopefully that recorded well enough to work, and I'll do another one a little later.